Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Matter of the Heart, where we bring you heartfelt, educational, and positive stories, all to elevate your spirit. I am your host, Carol Olivia, and always thank you so much for taking your time out to listen to the Matter of the Heart and watch it. The topic of the show really is, we're going to cover a few different things, certainly the word eternity. Which to me is such a powerful word, infinite word, and almost as if there is no separation between the physical and the spiritual plane. Maybe there's one light that bonds us into both of the realms. Well, we have an expert on this, Mark Anthony, and I know some of you listeners have actually gone to some of his workshops. You've mentioned him to me. And he's worldwide known as a psychic lawyer. And Mark Anthony connects with the other side and shares what loved ones are trying to tell us. He is known for his best-selling books, Evidence of Eternity and Never Letting Go. Welcome, Mark. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Carol. It's great to be back with you. And now we're on video. This is even cooler.
Yeah. And I think I've learned how to do it, everyone. I think he was very patient with me.
I think one of the very few benefits of COVID, and I mean very few, is that it's so many more events are online now. And I had a whole 2020 tour planned out. And it was interesting because toward the end of 2019, I was getting kind of a bad feeling about things. And we were waiting before booking some things. And I'm glad I trusted my intuition. But what's happened is we've replaced those, or I replaced those with online events. So I consider this Matters of the Heart episode part of my 2020 tour.
Oh, thank you. What does eternity mean to you, Mark, with all of the many clients and people that you've spoken to, but in your own words? Because to me, it's such a powerful word and it's infinite, but in your own perspective, with your wisdom.
The reason I smiled is because we're trying to describe the undescribable. And the reason that I say that, Carol, is, as a little boy, when I was in Catholic school, we'd always learn that God always was and always will be, and I think pretty much all the religions do that. And that used to really, really get me. And I think my first brush with eternity, I was about 4 years old. Well, actually, yeah, oh gosh, there's so much I could talk about with this. I had a near-death experience when I was 4. And in the near-death experience, I heard eternal light, eternal life. And the next thing I know, I'm in the hospital and my parents were there and I asked them, what is eternal? And I remember mom and dad looking at each other. And I found out years later that both of them had had NDEs throughout their lives. Now, that back then we didn't necessarily have a term for near-death experience. But a few months after that, my dad, we were living in Orlando, and he was a NASA engineer. He'd been a Navy SEAL. And I'll never forget this. It was a Saturday night, and it was pizza night. Mom was making a pizza. And after that, the whole family went into the driveway, and my dad had a bag of flashlights, and he gave us all flashlights. And he said, shine them at the stars, shine them at the moon. And he said, the light from your flashlight will go on forever.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, and I remember walking up to him, and my brother and sister and my mom, were there. And he said, Mark, remember when you asked about eternal? And so I'm sitting there, I'm 4, okay? But I was a pretty sharp kid. And I already knew how to spell Tyrannosaurus Rex and give a lecture on what it was and that sort of thing. And the thing is, Carol, when my father died 3 years ago, his house was near the beach, and I was there with my siblings, and we were like holding him when he stopped breathing. And that night, we walked up to the beach. It was my brother, sister, and I, and we were looking at the stars. And I said, you know, this is going to sound weird, but do you guys remember that night with the flashlights? And both of my brother and sister said, yeah. And it's turned out that was one of the happiest memories for all of us. And when we were looking at the stars, I couldn't help but to think of those flashlights from so long ago, and if some of those beams still were going on into eternity. So that's what eternity means to me.
Oh, that's beautiful. And would you certainly integrate nature with that? Is it nature, eternity, the stars, the sky, you know, everything?
Oh, certainly, certainly, because when we look at the stars, some of those stars burned out millions of years ago, but it's taken that long for their light to get here. So even though the body burned out, the energy from it, which is the light, continues on. And it's the same thing with our soul. Our soul, I use the term soul and spirit interchangeably because they're the same thing. I mean, I've heard some of these questionable psychics at some of these conferences spoke, oh, the soul and the spirit are different. It's like, stop that, okay? There's an energy field which is housed in our brain. And we know that the brain doesn't create consciousness. Because the thing is, Carol, neurobiologists, or the scientists that study the brain, they say that consciousness is created by the brain through chemical reactions and electrical impulses, but they can't explain how. And let's face it, the brain is just a carbon-12 resonator floating in salt water. And it's like a computer hard drive. And the computer hard drive doesn't create the programs on it. It merely hosts them. It's the same thing with the brain. The brain does not create consciousness. It hosts the consciousness, which pre-exists it. And when the brain hard drive crashes and our body dies, the consciousness moves on. And because it's pure energy and everything in the electromagnetic spectrum moves at the speed of light, it continues on.
Mm-hmm. You know, I just thought of something, Mark, and everyone. When we take pictures, Curling photography takes pictures of plants and sees it, in a way, it's eternal because it's seeing its energy. It's living,
Sure.
right?
Well, everything, Albert Einstein was absolutely right. There's no matter. There's only energy which vibrates at different frequencies so as to be perceptible to the senses. So this pen that I'm holding right here, if you know, it is a material object, but you know, we consider it to be inanimate. And traditionally, science has been broken into two fields: the biological and the physical. And the biological sciences study organic matter, and that includes the field of medicine. And the physical sciences include chemicals, energy, inorganic matter. But the distinction between the two ceases to exist on the subatomic level. Everything's made of molecules, which in turn are made of atoms, which in turn are made of electrons, protons, and neutrons. And now we know through quantum physics that those particles are made of an even smaller particle known as quanta. That's where the name quantum physics comes from. And everything at its most basic level is electromagnetic energy. So on the quantum level, I'm made of the same material that this pen is, and so is the electricity in the Tesla sphere back there that's sparking away, and the air that we're breathing, and the light that we're seeing, and the nuclear reactions in the sun. It's just that things vibrate at different frequencies, and so on the most basic level, everything is energy, which is why everything is interconnected.
You know, I'm curious now. You got me thinking. Everything vibrates at a different frequency. Is there such a thing as something that vibrates at a higher frequency?
Spirits.
Spirits.
Absolutely. Spirits do. And, you know, and also everything in the electromagnetic spectrum, radio waves, X-rays, ultraviolet, gamma rays, microwaves, they're moving they're vibrating at a higher frequency. And the way that I like to explain the difference between our world and the other side is think of FM and AM radio. Okay, they both use amplitude, AM, amplitude modulation. FM is frequency modulation, and AM radio has a lower frequency. FM radio has a higher frequency. So when we die, the energy that is our soul moves at a higher frequency and goes to FM. So we're living in AM radio, the other side's in FM radio, and spirit communication, near-death experiences, contacts by spirits is when the spirits lower their frequency and our brainwave frequency increases and you get a frequency match. And that's what I call interdimensional communication. And that's one of the terms that I introduce and explain in my book, Evidence of Eternity, because it's important for people to realize that this isn't hocus pocus, what you and I are talking about, Carol. I mean, I know you know that because we've had many discussions off air, but, people think that, well, when I die, that's it. And the laws of physics, according to people like Einstein and more recently, Dr. Michio Kaku, one of the founders of string theory, he said that eternal life does not violate the laws of physics because energy, which is what our soul is neither created nor destroyed, only transferred from one form to another. So from this slower vibration to the higher one in FM radio or the other side.
So I look at it that the spirit finds another home. In other words, when the physical body, just like a car, when the parts are kind of worn out, it's not going to live forever. And so you get another car. And I don't mean that in a callous way. But so when you're speaking, and I know you have made many tours, what do you feel that person would like to hear from you? Is there some type of a comfort zone? Where are they coming from? And how can they walk away from your form of communication feeling better?
Well, spirit communication is an important therapeutic step in the journey through grief. And there's as much as I wish I had the magic Harry Potter wand and I could go up to someone grieving and go, stop grieving. It doesn't work that way. And a lot of people think, well, if I get a reading, I'll be all better. But, they also think, well, if I take Prozac, I'll be better. Or if I do this, I'll be better. What we have to realize is that grief is part of the human condition, and it hurts and it's painful. And we also have to realize that we grieve as deeply as we have loved. And grief is the price of love. And so we have to confront and get through the grief. And there's two phases of it. I know that Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross talks about the 5 stages, and she's correct about that. But there's 2 phases. There's shock and there's trauma. And shock occurs right after the death. That's when you find out and you get that sinking feeling. And it lasts anywhere from maybe 2 weeks up to a month where, you feel like you're, watching everything. And eventually that will fade and then the trauma sets in. And so with trauma, counseling, turning to your faith community, turning to family and friends, getting some physical exercise, doing some motivational, inspirational activities. And then when you're ready, usually about 6 months, 4 to 6 months after the passing, I believe that you're ready then for spirit communication. Because a lot of people say, well, I want to do it right away. But if you're hysterically crying and not paying attention and can't focus, you're not going to get anything beneficial out of it. So 6 months later, when your emotions have somewhat stabilized and you're able to focus and pay attention, that's when you're going to begin getting the maximum benefit from the reading. So what comes out of it is to understand that your loved one has not disintegrated into nothingness, that your relationship with that person has gone from one of a physical nature to one of a spiritual nature, that they are around you and aware of what's happening, and that they have continued on into a new form of existence. So I think that, Carol, to answer your question directly, spirit communication is about love, healing, and resolution, and realizing that somebody that meant so much to you continues on and didn't just disintegrate.
Mm-hmm. Somebody was talking to me about the Tibetan Book of the Dead, that it takes 49 days, that their belief or their philosophy, we'll call it, is that the spirit takes 49 days to reincarnate. So when you speak, I'm just curious, what is your insight with that? In other words, when you speak, how do you know when to connect to that spirit? Is it a certain amount of days that?
Yeah, there's a lot of religions, and and I
Right.
give a lot of credit to the Tibetans and the Book of the Dead, but to me that's a bunch of, with all due respect, primitive, superstitious nonsense. Once again, let's go to quantum physics. We're pure energy. As soon as we die, energy's out, moves at light speed. Okay, there's all this. Oh, the spirits go through this healing and blah blah blah. I've heard all this gobbledygook. No, I mean I've communicated with spirits like
Right.
within seconds of them leaving a body. Okay,
Right.
and I've seen people die, and I've seen the energy surge out of them, and it's really intense. And my father was one of those people that I saw this light come out of him. And the thing is, everybody in the room said, "What was that light?" And that's what's known as a shared death experience. When bystanders, including pretty much everyone there who was not a medium, there's myself and one other medium and about 6 other people there, they all saw the same thing. And that's because we all got caught up in that frequency shift from my dad going from the material world to the other side. But there is no set period of when a spirit can communicate. They can communicate right away. And I know people say, well, what if they've reincarnated? We're also judging an infinite entity like our spirit by finite human limitations, and you can't do that. We are multidimensional beings, which means that our soul, even when it's anchored in our body, in our brain, can still make contact with the other side. It's like, when you have a dream and a loved one comes to you, or you get a glimpse, or, with what I do. And even if somebody's reincarnated, you still have this connection to what I call the collective consciousness, which is all the souls on the other side. Think of the collective consciousness, or your connection to it, as a librarian that's read all these different books, and you died being a character in this book, and now you've been recast in this other book. Okay, well, the collective consciousness retains the memories of all those lifetimes. So even if you were in War and Peace, but now you're in The Godfather, you've come back as Michael Corleone or something, we can still communicate with your higher self and receive messages. And people find that hard to wrap their head around, and you should, because we're dealing with different dimensions, we're dealing with quantum energy, and we're dealing with things that go beyond our 5 physical senses, our ability to perceive things through sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch.
Mm-hmm.
But I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. So relating to that, and maybe you've already answered this. So when we pass, sometimes I don't even like to use the word death because it seems so finite. When we pass, are all of our past souls, if you believe in this, also leaving, or are they,
Well, there's one soul per customer. You're the same. You're the same entity, same individuality. But you go. Think of it this way: each lifetime that you go through,
right.
there's people that you're going to go through it with. It's like a cast, a troupe of actors, and
Yes.
in each lifetime, they're all cast in different parts. Okay, so you're always the same actor. You just may be playing different parts. And people can change genders and professions and races, and I don't believe in hell. I mean, hell to me is a ridiculous medieval construct based on I do a whole presentation on the development of the history of hell, but I do believe in karma. So be nice, okay, because you never know what you're going to come back as, or in what circumstance. And that's the whole point. I mean, the idea of a god being a neurotic white guy sitting on a throne with a scepter smiting people, that you can see where that came from, out of the Dark Ages. The collapse of the Roman Empire, and the early Christians casting God in the role of a Roman emperor, and all of that. And certainly that was helping people at that time to relate to the, because to them, the all-powerful emperor or king or whatever throughout the medieval world, and then when the Muslims took over the Middle East and they incorporated that to where now God was a caliph. We have to realize that it's very normal for human beings to want to anthropomorphize God and put a human face on God so that it is more relatable than this vast, infinite intelligence. So there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that don't take those constructs too seriously.
That makes sense. So, I mean, you've heard so many different stories, confidential stories, private stories. Then what is God to you? You just mentioned something, but what is this infinite source? We've heard about the light. I know the Bible mentions a light in Genesis. You'd like to give us your insight, Mark?
If you look at what every great spiritual teacher, if we go back 5,000 years ago to the sages of India and Krishna, and then you go to Moses, and then Buddha, and Jesus, and Muhammad, and Lao Tzu, and the Native Americans, and you just go through all of it. God is always described in terms of light. And for me, God is a pure energy that connects and binds all of us. And I'm not being flippant when I say this. From Star Wars, we hear about the Force that binds everyone. Well, George Lucas had a near-death experience when he was 16 years old, and within a few years of that, he had a rough draft for Star Wars. And the Force is based on his contact with the light. And so the light is how humans describe the spiritual energy of God, because that's the only form of electromagnetic energy visible to the human eye. I think a very relatable story for a lot of people is Moses' encounter with the bush that burned yet did not, was not consumed by the fire. So how would somebody living in the Bronze Age, as Moses did, describe an encounter with an intense form of electromagnetic energy? Well, he would use the vernacular of the day, and for him, the most powerful form of radiant energy outside of lightning was fire. So he would describe it as the fire that burned yet did not consume the bush. And it's similar in the New Testament in I believe it's the book of Acts. I think it's chapter 2, the Pentecost. Jesus has already left this world. His mission's complete. And his disciples and his mother Mary are together, and tongues of fire appear above their heads because they're channeling the power of the Holy Spirit. What's fascinating is when you look at Hinduism and Buddhism, and they talk about the chakras. These are energy centers throughout our body. There's 7 of them, the 7 main ones. They correspond with the locations of the endocrine glands, which are chemical, electrical organs. But the crown chakra, which it corresponds with the pituitary gland in the brain, when you do aura work and you see auras around people, the crown chakra kind of has this flickery, energetic appearance. So if you're living in the Iron Age in 1st century AD, how would you describe that using the vernacular of the day? It would look like a tongue of fire. And so all these religions are basically reporting on the same type of thing. And I really like what the 13th century Islamic scholar Rumi said. He said, the lamps may be different, but the light is the same.
Which makes sense, right? Yeah, he was brilliant, totally brilliant.
He was. I wish there were more followers of his philosophy.
Yes. Yeah, no, he was brilliant. I remember that actually. So you mentioned the shock. I mean, there's so much to this as far as what eternity means. So what can we learn from just the word eternity? How can we integrate that with our daily lives? Would it create more freedom within ourselves? Would it create more inner security? Would it be more of the acceptance, so to speak?
I love your questions, Carol. You always, that's so good. What can we learn from eternity? Well, I think number one is let's not take ourselves so seriously. I used to have a sign in my office when I was practicing law that said, don't take life so seriously. You'll never get out of it alive, and I always thought that was
That's a good one.
a lot of people didn't understand that. But the thing is, I think that it adds perspective that we are truly eternal beings, but for various reasons, we are having a finite experience here so that we can have a lot of experiences and encounters and sensations that you can't when you're purely pure energy. But I think that so many people are afraid of death, and I'm certainly never encouraging anyone to resort to suicide, but we have to realize that we're here for a reason, and that we have to make each day count while we're in this limited finite form. And the nice thing to know is that when we're done here, like you said, we get out of that car and we get into another one. So hopefully we'll be getting out of the banged up Ford Escort and into the new Maserati.
Or a Toyota Corolla, like I have, Mark, a 99 named Sassy. Go ahead, Mark.
No, that's great.
I just can't help but think, when you're connecting to people, are you also connecting to their mission?
Sometimes it will come through from the other side what a person's purpose here is. But the thing about spirit communication, it provides guidance. Spirits are not here to control us, or certainly not to frighten us. And, because a lot of people are like, well, I'm scared about this. And it's like, yeah, but this is a conversation with people you love who love you. They're not here to do that. And what they can do is they can point out things that you need to reflect on. I get a lot of medical information in my readings about the people that I'm doing the reading for. And, it made me feel really good. I was in Texas at the beginning of the year, right before the whole COVID thing went off the scale. And I was at a public event, and this gentleman came up to me with his wife, and they were real excited. He goes, I know you don't remember me, but I was here over a year ago, and you did a reading, and you said to me that I had better, you said, get your heart checked yesterday, right away. And he was like, oh, and he goes, my wife made me go to the doctor, and they said I was this close to a heart attack. I was right on the verge. And he goes, I've turned that around. Thank you so much. And first off, I was very grateful, but it isn't about me. I'm the custodian of the ability. I'm just the radio that the information comes through. So I can't make people listen to the messages that come through. But something like that, Carol, is what I call spirit intervention. Because what's happening is this guy's going to have a life. There's a day you're coming in, a day you're going out. And if he had the heart attack, it could have put him in a disabled state, in a debilitated state, and really made the balance of his lifetime very difficult. But the spirits that love him came in and said, okay, we're giving you the heads up, and you can improve this condition. And I've also had other people who completely rejected what I was telling them, and then I heard from them afterwards, and sadly, they told me how much they regretted that because of what happened. And I take absolutely no pleasure in that at all. Here's the way I put it. If a spirit's going to come all the way from the other side to tell you that you need to get this checked or start doing that, you need to take it seriously. I had this one couple they're actually at a public event, and the spirit started targeting the husband and kept saying, there's something about your lower GI tract, your colon area, and it's really bad, really serious, and you have an elevated white blood cell count. I mean, this was all coming out, and they're like, and then he's rolling his eyes, and they're all but laughing at me. And I said, that's fine. Okay. But if I were you, I would do this. A month later, I get an email from the wife, and she said, boy, do we wish we would have listened to you, because a week after you did that reading, my husband's appendix burst, and the peritonitis was so bad that they had to remove his colon.
Oh.
And the surgeon said if we'd had a simple blood test, an elevated white blood cell count would have alerted us what to look for. And that actually made me feel really bad, because I was trying to get them to listen, and they were like, oh, I'm fine, I'm fine. And the way I look at it is, look, if I'm interpreting it incorrectly, so you went to the doctor, but if the information coming through is being interpreted accurately, then this could save your life, or certainly preserve the quality of it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It's like a spiritual MRI.
It is. It is. And people ask, well, how do they know these things? Once
Right.
again, their energy. So they do like a whole scan and they'll find disruptions. It's really, because I was a personal injury attorney in addition to being I was a criminal defense personal injury attorney. I did Social Security disability. And then before all that, I was a prosecutor. So I've dealt with a lot of forensics. I mean, physics, forensics, medicine has been part of my life for my life. And so I have a basic understanding of anatomy and physiology, and spirits know that. But they give me things that go way beyond what I know. When they start talking about genetic markers and things going on with you in a cellular level, and I'm reporting all this, and the people are like, and I've had some people say, well, that actually runs in our family. I don't know these things, but the collective consciousness does. So spirit, being pure energy, they scan and they start picking up on these anomalies and problems in the body, and then they transmit it to me, and hopefully, I'm understanding it accurately enough to tell you.
So I'm curious, when they're doing that, Mark, I don't know if you could answer me because you're not, but are they actually tapping into the colors of the body as well?
Well, it depends on the psychic medium. With me, they just tell me, okay?
Okay.
And what happens is I feel it. Like they'll start
Okay.
going, okay, I'm getting this, and this.
Yeah.
And there's no physical or cellular damage to me. It's a sensation. It's
Okay.
also, and they do the same type of strategy, if you will. Let's say I'm doing a reading for somebody and their loved one comes through. And I will pick up, first I get a gender, then I may get an idea of the relationship to you, like if they're on your generation or the one above it or what have you. Then they're going to start communicating to me how they passed. And I'll feel various sensations throughout my body, and I can start describing that. And so there's like a protocol that they go through. But then I may get the feeling that, oh, they're focusing on Carol, and they'll start talking about things that are going on with you. So I find it very, very fascinating how they work with
Oh,
me.
definitely. No question about it. I mean, we mentioned sensations. I'm also very creative, and an artist has, of course, sensations when they're painting or they're writing. But you're talking about a sensation that's on a very, very, very high frequency when you're
Right.
tapping, when you're receiving these messages. I mean, how high is the frequency? Is there such a thing as you would know? I don't know.
Well, I was my friend and colleague, Dr. Gary Schwartz. He's the head of psychology
Right.
and surgery at the University of Arizona, and I was reading something that he sent me, and he's working on technology to communicate with spirits, and so they're looking in certain megahertz bands and things like
Right.
that. And I do know that on the paranormal investigations I've been on, when they do EVP, electronic voice phenomena, for everyone who's never been on a ghost hunt, do it. I mean, it's put it on your bucket list. It's a lot of fun. But a lot of the technology that they're using is searching certain bands within AM, and they'll start picking up on voice phenomena. It's pretty cool when you start hearing stuff. I had a very, very heavy duty experience with that. I was actually at a paranormal conference. I was one of the speakers, and my manager, there was this big auditorium, and people were having all the stuff, and all the ghost hunters were there, and they had all their gizmos and gazmos and stuff. And all of a sudden I hear my manager going, Rocky, she's, Mark, get over here. And I'm looking, and these people are all panicked. And so I walk over and I go, what's going on? And what was happening is Rocky was walking by this equipment, and as she walked by it, she heard this voice go, get Mark, get Mark. And she stopped, and the guy that was selling it goes, that's a get Mark. And Rocky's like, I know that voice. So she calls me, and when I walk up, all of a sudden I hear, dude. And I knew that voice too. And he goes, love you, bro. Let me tell you, the tears just shot out of my eyes, because 6 months before that, my best friend, Billy,
Oh,
and he
wow.
was a surfer, and he always used to call me bro. We traveled through Asia together. A lot of the stuff in this room I collected during one of those trips. And he'd always like, dude, love you, bro. And it was his voice coming out of this thing.
Hmm.
And there's no way anyone could have set this up because, the guy selling it, he didn't know me from Adam. And Rocky walked by and it says, "Get Mark." And I walk up and I go, "Dear God, that was his voice." And she
That's
started like, it was
wow.
intense. It was cool. But it really, and when spirits that I love contact me, it affects me too.
Oh, yeah. So what um, I'm getting a lot, but there's no timing. In other words, obviously they have their own form of communication. There's no timing because there's no clock up there. So
Yeah.
it's their experience of events, I guess, or the events or the sensation. Well, maybe are they there on a sensation timing? Are the sensations um, their form of timing, so to speak?
It could be. It could be. I believe they certainly, having been in corporeal form,
Right,
they know what we think time is, but
right.
they have the insight that it doesn't exist. Yet on the other hand, they seem to know when the right time is to come through.
That's
Because I
it.
get a lot of people like, "They never come to me. I don't know why they come to me. Why they come to me?" And it's like, well, let's start with the energetic deflector shield that you're putting up. Or people that they're in such a profound state of grief and they're hysterical. Why do they come? It's like, okay, you have to realize that without intending to, you're creating a negative energy barrier and which they can't penetrate. It's like on Star Trek, ray shields. Okay, you're raising deflector shields. All right, let's get those shields down. And I've also had some people go, "Well, I want a spiritual experience and I want it now." It's like, okay, it doesn't work that way. We live in this on-demand society where everything is like, here, just Google it, text it, but and spirituality doesn't work that way. It's not an on-demand thing. It's like people that come into a reading and I get all this information. Yeah, that's all accurate. But until I hear that one thing, I had a guy, I was getting all this stuff and all he did was argue with me. And I said, "Look, we're done. I'm not going to sit there and argue with someone, because he needed to hear the one secret word. And until he heard that, and see, by doing that, I want, is the same thing
Yes.
as saying no, 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 and you're creating a barrier and you're pushing the spirits away. And that's what you can't go into a reading with until I hear this.
So it's allowing, obviously, total freedom because the spirit is in a free environment, I would think, and to begin with. And so that freedom is, it's just creating the atmosphere for an entrance to the person. I would think the freedom is needed, no resistance. I find it so interesting, though, the timing, Mark, when a spirit is going to connect to that person, and is it usually very valuable message to that person, or could it be not so valuable?
It depends on how the person interprets it. I've had some people, say, "Oh, I'm getting this, though." "Yeah, well, I already know that." So, well, yeah, but I don't. Okay. And the spirit is bringing in things which are validating who he or she is.
Okay,
But people who are serious and open-minded towards spirit communication will find the information coming through very valuable.
okay.
But you can get the hyperanalyzers, the overthinkers. The second that it comes in, I call it cross-examining the experience. I'm a
Right,
lawyer, so it's like putting the spirit. "So you would have us believe,"
right.
get the messages in. Then after the reading, hyperanalyze away. "Well, I thought there'd be more." "Well, yeah, but you sat there and argued with me for half of the reading."
Well,
Okay.
feel the message, I would say. First, initially feel the message,
Feel.
and then maybe think about it. But because the spirits, obviously, you're the expert, are on a feeling vibration. They're not analyzing. They're
You nailed it right on the head, Carol. Feel first, think later. Like I was doing a session for this young lady. Her boyfriend had died. He comes through and I get the image of a refrigerator. "No, no, no. Are you sure?" "No, that makes no sense." "No." I go, "Come on. I just don't fling out random kitchen appliances hoping to get a hit. What's up with the refrigerator?" "Well, he was a chef." Okay, well, there's one red flag going up. "And before he died, he made this beautiful dinner and I froze it. We were going to have it. And then he overdosed and died. And since that time, I open up the freezer every day to look at it. I go, well, then the answer is yes. No, it isn't. You didn't say the freezer part. You just said the refrigerator part. Now, what did she do? No, 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 no. Hyperanalyze, overthink, overthink, overthink. She shoved her boyfriend's spirit away when what he was trying to tell her is, I know that you look at that every day, and I know that it makes you cry, and I know that you love me. But she was so hyper focused on getting what she wanted. And then when I explained just that to her, she burst into tears, and then her deflector shield started coming down, and she became more open to the messages then. But a lot of people go into this, this is a feeling thing. And I understand being hyper analytical. I'm an attorney. I've been raised to question everything and they're trained to. But I also realize that in spirit communication, you got to get that out of the way and use your heart. And that's why, we've always heard about women's intuition. Okay. It's a real thing. For men, we have it too. You can call it instinct because that's more Harrison Fordy and Denzel-ish, But what's happening is we're vibrationally receiving information. We're receiving a vibration. And the reason that we feel it in our gut, in our stomach, is because the second most complex bundle of nerves outside of the cerebral cortex in the brain is the solar plexus at the bottom of the rib cage. And that's the receptor area for the feelings, the emotions, and the sensory input. The data, the facts, the voices, the visual images come into the pineal gland in the brain and then are interpreted through the cerebral cortex. So we have two major receptor areas in our body for psychic or intuitive ability.
So when you're receiving the messages, Mark Anthony, what area of your body, you're just talking about the pineal, so where is it going to first?
Well, I've been studied, if you will, both here and in the UK, not only by scientists, but by other mediums. And some people are mostly visual, some people are mostly auditory, some people are mostly feelers. I'm all of it. Okay. I see it, hear it, feel it, know it, taste things, smell things. So it will zip all around the way I get it.
Yeah, I'm picking up, you get it instantly. You don't have to go through 10 prayers. I mean, it just comes through quickly.
It comes through really quickly.
Right.
And it's always good when I have a recipient that's quick on the uptake and can connect the dots, because then it gets moving. But when I have people that either overthink or they're just saying no without thinking, a funny example of this, I was doing a public event in Florida and this woman's husband came through, and I said that, okay, he showed me a big target and I'm seeing like archery, images of archery. No, are you sure? No. I go, well, did he shoot at targets? Yeah, with bows and arrows. And before I could say anything, somebody in the crowd yells out, "Oh, for God's sakes!" And it's like she didn't know that archery meant using a bow and arrow. And so, and I can't fault her for having that lack of knowledge. But when you run into things like that, it really slows things down because I want to get cooking and they're sitting there like, stumbling over things like that. Because what you have to realize that in a reading, think of it as like a triangle.
Yeah.
Other side at the top, that's where the spirits are. I'm over here, I'm the medium, and the recipient's there. So all three are working together. They're giving me the information, I'm giving it to you, and I need the confirmation. I was doing a reading for this, it was on a TV show. And I felt so sorry for this lady. She was a little older, and I could see she was scared. I mean, it's hard enough being on TV as it is. I'm on TV a lot, and I have to admit, and I don't care who you are. I mean, I talk to famous actors on it, we get nervous. Okay, the lights come on, all that, but you learn how to do the ball and James Bond, And so I'm standing up there, and now it's like, here, Mark, do spirit communication before the commercial break, right? So her son comes through, and I know it's just like it's like these shows where that are these so-called reality psychic shows. Please, they're all scripted and edited. I'm always doing it live on TV, right? And so this woman and her son comes through. And I said, I'm seeing the image of a cross, and I'm getting cross, the word cross. No, no. And her husband's sitting next to her. No, cross. No. So, and then the host goes, well, we have to go to a commercial break. And she's staring at me, and her husband goes, so this is the 4 minutes between the two TV segments while the commercials are playing.
Right.
He goes, well, our last name is Cross.
Oh, I love
I
it.
go, you mean like your son's last name?
Right. I love that.
Oh, yeah. And I could hear the host going like, oh. And so when we come back on, she goes, so during the commercial break, whatever her name was, realized that her name was Cross. And Mark said Cross. He goes, so Mark, why don't you go to somebody else? And I felt bad for the lady. But the thing is, she was so scared. Okay, here she is on TV. There's a live audience. And then there's the lights, the cameras, and she just froze.
Right.
And so you can't, you can't think ill of somebody like that. I mean, it's difficult when someone doesn't, realize their own name, but that can happen in a reading, and it bogs down the process. And so somebody like that, it's better to be in a private one-on-one where I've got more time with them. And are you sure Cross doesn't make any sense? Well, it is my name. And say, oh, well then, so.
Unfortunately, there's just a minute or two left, but I can't help but think, as a result of the human side of all of the stories and the interactions with people, that it's also enhanced more and more compassion with you, because you're listening to these stories that are very challenging just to listen to, I would think. Well, not you're listening, your spirit, but the compassion element, Mark.
It's heart-wrenching.
Yeah.
It's heart-wrenching, but I have to maintain my objective professionalism. And, Carol, for the benefit of your listeners, if somebody would like to schedule a reading with me, you have to mention Carol's name and the name of the podcast, Matters of the Heart, and qualify for a reduced fee in my readings. And please visit my website, evidenceofeternity.com. Click on the link that says schedule a phone reading. Phone readings are just as accurate as in-person readings. And but you have to mention Carol Adams and Matters of the Heart, and you'll be eligible for a reduction in a one-on-one session with me. Once again, Carol, thank you for having me as your guest. I love you, and I love working with you.
Oh, anytime, Mark. I'm going to go for a reading for sure. So
Thank you.
And you've been listening to Mark Anthony, psychic lawyer, and he certainly brought that in with the show, his past experiences, which I find interesting because that's the cerebral part. You're combining the right and the left side of the brain, Mark, with your...
A lot of work.
but
worth it. It's definitely worth it.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And you've been listening to The Matter of the Heart. I've been your host, Carol, and always, thank you so much, everybody.